You're staring at the pieces now. They don't look like they will ever fit again. The edges are jagged, sharp enough to draw blood if you try to force them together. The colors are dulled by dust, and somewhere in those fragments, you recognize the shape of what you once had. A life, a love, a trust that felt so unshakable you didn't think twice about its strength. And yet here you are, hands trembling over what used to be whole. The break didn't happen quietly. It came with a sound. Maybe it was the slam of a door. Maybe it was the silence that followed a sentence you never thought you'd hear. Maybe it was a truth pulled from the shadows, one that left you gasping for air. In that moment, something inside you fractured too. And when the people around you said time will heal it, you wanted to believe them. But deep down, you already knew time alone wouldn't be enough. Because when love breaks, it doesn't just disappear. It turns into 1,000 unspoken questions. Why did this happen? Can we ever trust each other again? Was everything before this a lie? These questions don't fade on their own. They sit there in the center of the room, watching you. They follow you to bed at night. They sit at the table in the morning. They ride in the car between you when neither of you speaks. You tell yourself you're just giving it time, but the truth is, the longer you leave them unanswered, the heavier they become. Right now, it might feel impossible to imagine rebuilding. You've seen couples who try and fail. You've heard stories of people who pretend to heal, only to crumble again later. You might even have voices in your head, your own, or borrowed from friends and family, whispering that it would be easier to walk away than to try. And maybe they're right if all you want is easy. But if you want something more, something stronger than before, then walking away is not the answer. Here's the truth you might not have heard yet. A relationship that has been shattered can be rebuilt. Not into the exact same thing it once was, but into something even stronger. Just like the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with veins of gold, your cracks can become part of your beauty. Your past can be something you don't hide, but hold up to the light as proof of how far you've come. And if you listen closely, not just to this story, but to yourself and to each other, you will find the way. You've already survived the break. You've lived through the night where you didn't think you'd see morning. You've stood in the storm without knowing if it would pass. That means you already have the strength to face what comes next. What you need now is not the belief that it will be easy, but the understanding that it will be worth it. In this guide, we will walk through the steps that take you from fragments to something whole again. We'll talk about how to look at the truth without turning away, how to let yourself feel without letting pain define you, how to rebuild trust so deeply that it becomes a foundation, not a fragile truth. And by the end of this journey, you will see, not in theory, but in the way your own heart feels, that love can survive the breaking. But first, you need to stop doing one thing. You need to stop pretending the break never happened. Too many couples try to skip straight to the fix. They bury the hurt under quick promises, sudden gestures, or desperate closeness. They smile for the outside world, thinking if they look happy long enough, the inside will catch up. But the wound doesn't close that way. It only hides under a thin layer of hope that tears the moment you put weight on it. If you want to rebuild for real, you have to look at the wound. You have to name what happened. You have to stop hiding the cracks from each other and instead trace them with your fingers, learning where they start, where they go, and what caused them. This part is not easy. It means facing shame, guilt, anger, betrayal. It means letting each other speak without rushing to defend yourself. It means holding space for truths you wish you didn't have to hear. But it is the only way forward. Because anything built on silence will fall again. You might think, if I open it up, we'll only fight more. We'll make it worse. And yes, the first conversations may hurt. They may feel like pouring salt on a wound. But that sting is the body's way of telling you it's alive, and healing is possible. What truly makes it worse is pretending it doesn't hurt at all. If you can, remember this. Every gold-filled crack in kintsugi started as a fracture. The beauty came later. when someone cared enough to see the brokenness as something worth saving. You and your partner can do the same, but not if you both keep looking away. So here is where you start. You sit down together, not to fix, not to forgive instantly, but to name the break, to lay the pieces between you and see them for what they are. Maybe you each write down what happened in your own words. Maybe you share one thing you've never said about that day or that moment. You speak, you listen, and you resist the urge to defend or rewrite. You agree that the truth, however hard, is the ground you will build on. It will feel fragile at first, like walking on ice, like breathing after a long dive. But in that fragility is the seed of trust, because trust doesn't grow from perfection. It grows from honesty, from seeing each other's worst and staying anyway. And then, without you even noticing, the silence between you will start to sound different. Not the heavy kind that feels like a wall, but the quiet of two people learning how to be near each other again. The quiet where hands almost meet, where eyes linger for a little longer, where the heart starts to remember the shape of safety. That's how it begins. Not with a grand gesture, not with a flawless plan, but with the smallest, bravest choice you can make to stay, to look, to listen. Because even after something breaks, beauty is still possible. And sometimes it's in the very cracks themselves where love learns how to shine. It begins quietly, not with a sudden flood of trust, not with a perfect conversation that makes everything better overnight, but with the slow, almost hesitant return of small kindnesses. The way they place a cup of tea in front of you without being asked. The way you choose not to bring up that same argument for the third time today. The way a hand brushes yours when you pass in the hallway. Not in a grand cinematic moment, but in a way that says, I'm still here. These are not grand repairs, but gentle threads. And if you keep weaving them, they will hold. You both start to realize that healing isn't a single act, it's a language you have to learn together. It's in the pauses, the listening, the way you decide to let certain words go instead of sharpening them into weapons. It's in the choice to ask, what did you mean by that, instead of assuming the worth. It's in the decision to keep your eyes soft when you answer, even when your heart still remembers the sting. At first, it feels awkward, like speaking in a language you've only just begun to learn. You stumble over the sentences, reach for the right words, and miss them. And yet there's a quiet understanding that you are both trying. Each of these small acts is a drop of gold in the fracture. Alone, they seem almost invisible. Together, they start to change the shape of what you're building. But here's what makes this stage hard. The memories still exist. The moment of breaking hasn't vanished. And there will be days it rises between you like a shadow stretching across the floor. One word, one glance, one accidental reminder. And it feels like you're right back at the beginning. The heart doesn't always heal in a straight line. It circles back, it reopens, it tests your resolve. This is where many couples turn away, thinking the presence of pain means they've failed. It doesn't. It only means you are still in the middle of the work. The truth is, rebuilding is not about erasing the pain, it's about carrying it differently. At first, you carried it like a weight that pulled you under. Every thought, every movement felt heavier because it was there. Now, little by little, you start carrying it like a scar, visible, yes, but no longer bleeding. A scar does not mean you are still broken. It means you have healed in a way that makes you different, but no less whole. To reach this place, you have to master one thing most people avoid. You have to make space for both joy and grief at the same table. Some days, laughter will come back before trust does. You'll find yourself laughing at the same joke, sharing the same memory, and for a second, you'll remember why you ever chose each other. Then almost immediately, the heaviness will creep in. The reminder that everything is not yet fixed. That's okay. Healing is not the removal of grief, but the ability to let it sit beside joy without driving it away. The relationship you are rebuilding will never be untouched by what happened, but it can be made strong enough to carry it. This is where you begin to create new memories, not to cover the old ones, but to stand beside them, like fresh blooms next to weathered stone. It could be as simple as cooking a meal together without rushing, or walking through a place you've never been before, so your eyes can rest on something that isn't tied to the past. It might be starting a project together, something that needs both of you to show up. A garden, a room to paint, a small promise to wake up early one morning and watch the sunrise. You're not forcing happiness, you're allowing it. And every shared moment you create now becomes another thread in the repair, another thin line of gold where the pieces once separated. But there's something you must guard against in this stage, the temptation to keep score. You gave them a second chance, so they should do the same for you. Apologize twice, so they should apologize twice. You took the first step toward closeness yesterday, so today it should be their turn. This invisible accounting might feel like fairness, but it's really a slow corrosion of the bond you're trying to rebuild. Love cannot survive in a balance sheet. It grows only in the freedom to give without measuring what comes back. Still, giving without expectation is not the same as ignoring your needs. The gold that binds you is not made from denial, it's made from honesty that is wrapped in tenderness. If something hurts, you name it. But you name it in a way that invites understanding, not defense. You don't throw the broken piece across the room again, you place it gently on the table and say, this one still needs work. That's the difference between reopening a wound and tending to it. As you walk through this stage, you begin to notice subtle shifts. The eye contact that used to break too quickly now lingers for just a moment longer. The conversations that once ended in slammed doors now end in tired but mutual understanding. You start to see that it isn't one big act of forgiveness that will save you. It's 100 tiny acts of choosing each other again, even when it would be easier not. Some days, you'll feel closer than you've ever been. Other days you'll wonder if any of this effort will hold. On those days, remember this. The point of kintsugi is not to hide the fact that it was broken, it's to show that the break became part of the beauty. The work you are doing now will not erase the cracks, but it will make them shine. This is how the language of gold is learned. One hesitant word, one softened tone, one choice not to turn away. And slowly, as the pieces begin to hold together with something stronger than before, you will realize that what you're creating is not the same as what was lost. It is something entirely new. Something that carries your history in every shining line, but no longer bleeds when touched. This is the quiet strength of love that is broken and lived. And the more you nurture it, the more you'll see, even the most fragile beginnings can grow into something unshakable. At first, trust comes back in moments so small you almost miss the way you answer a question without hesitation, the way they leave their phone face up on the table without flinching, the way you both walk into a room and without planning it stand side by side instead of across from each other. None of these moments are dramatic. There's no applause, no visible gold dust swirling in the air. But inside you feel something, the slow return of safety, the quiet exhale of a heart that's been holding its breath for too long. Rebuilding trust is nothing like you imagined it would be. You thought it would be a switch. One day you'd wake up and feel the way you used to. Instead, it's more like tending a small flame in the wind. You shield it with your hands. You watch it flicker and almost go out. You feed it carefully, knowing that too much too soon can smother it just as easily as too little. Some days it feels exhausting. You wonder if you're just pretending, but then there are those other days, the ones where the laughter feels real, where your chest feels lighter, where you forget for a moment that anything was ever broken. Those days are proof. The flame is growing. But here's the part no one tells you. Trust after breaking is never exactly the same as trust before it. And that's not a bad thing. The old trust was built on the idea that you would never hurt each other. An idea that no matter how much love exists, isn't entirely real. The new trust is different. It's built on knowing that you could hurt each other, that you have hurt each other, and choosing still to stay. This trust is not blind, it is wide-eyed. And because of that, it is stronger. In the beginning, you may test each other without realizing it. A delayed reply to a message. A night when one of you stays out later than expected. A conversation that brushes too close to an old wound. Each time you feel that familiar tightening in your chest, the part of you that remembers the breaking. And each time, the way you respond writes a new chapter in the story of your healing. Do you lash out? Do you withdraw? Or do you name the feeling, ask for reassurance and listen when it's given? These are the choices that shape the new trust. It's not just about what you do when things are calm, it's about how you handle the moments when the storm clouds roll back in. There will be misunderstandings, there will be bad days, but trust grows not in the absence of conflict, but in the way you hold each other through it. Sometimes that means standing your ground without cruelty. Sometimes it means admitting you were wrong before the other person has to point it out. And sometimes it means giving them space not because you're pushing them away, but because you trust they'll come back. There's a moment somewhere in this process when you realize something has changed. You no longer wake up scanning for signs that the break is about to happen again. You no longer replay the worst moments in your mind every time there's a pause in conversation. Instead, you start to notice the quiet evidence that you're both showing up, day after day, in ways that matter. And this is when trust begins to breathe again. But breathing doesn't mean you never lose air. There will still be moments when fear grips you, when you imagine the floor cracking under your feet. In those moments, it's tempting to run back to old defenses, old distances, old walls. But every time you resist that urge, you teach your relationship something vital. That safety is not found in the absence of fear, but in the decision to stay present, despite it. The most powerful trust you can build now comes from transparency. Not forced, not performative, but chosen. It's the willingness to let each other see what you used to hide, to say, "I'm having doubts today," without fearing that it will undo all the progress you've made, to admit when you're struggling, instead of putting on the mask of being fine. Because this kind of openness isn't weakness, it's proof that you believe the other person can handle the truth. And when that belief is met with care, trust deepens in a way it never could before. You begin to realize that trust, like love, is a living thing. It needs tending, it needs nourishment, it needs room to breathe, which means you can't cling so tightly to it that it suffocates. You have to let it stretch, move, and sometimes wander to the edges before it returns. The old you might have panicked at that space. The new you understands it's part of the rhythm. One day you'll look at the person beside you and realize you're not watching for cracks anymore. You're not holding your breath, waiting for them to drop the pieces again. You've stopped measuring their every move against the moment they broke your trust. Instead, you're watching the way the gold catches the light, the way the new lines in your story don't hide the past but carry it with a quiet dignity. And that's when you'll know the flame is steady now. Trust has learned to breathe again, not because the past has vanished, but because you've proven again and again that you can hold each other through it. And in the way you look at each other now, there is something that wasn't there before. Not innocence, not naivety, but a strength forged in fire and mended with gold. A strength that will not break in the same way twice. There comes a day when you wake up, and the first thing you feel isn't the weight of what happened. It's something else, lighter, soft, a small pull toward the person beside you. Not because you need to fix anything, but simply because you want to. The air feels different, not entirely free of the past, but no longer thick with it. This is the moment you realize you're no longer just surviving, you're starting to live again. Thriving after a break doesn't happen because you forget. It happens because you've learned how to remember without pain ruling the memory. It's the way your mind can look back at the day everything fell apart, and instead of feeling the floor drop away beneath you, you feel the ground you've built since, stronger, steadier, and far more intentional than before. At this stage, you begin to notice a shift in the way you speak to each other. The conversations aren't just about repairing wounds anymore. They're about building dreams. You talk about where you want to travel, the things you want to learn together, the life you want to shape in the years ahead. And these talks aren't just plans for the future. They're acts of trust in themselves. Because to dream together again is to say, I believe we'll still be here when those days come. This is also when gratitude quietly returns. Not the automatic kind you say out of politeness, but the deep, unexpected kind that catches you in the middle of an ordinary moment. Like when they remember how you take your coffee, or when you notice the way they lean closer in a crowded room without even thinking about it, or when you're walking somewhere together and realize your steps have fallen into rhythm. These aren't grand gestures, but they're proof that love, even after breaking, still knows how to create comfort in the smallest spaces. In thriving, you also discover the beauty of play again. You laugh in ways that don't feel measured. You find little jokes that belong only to the two of you. You share small adventures, wandering into a new street, trying a food you can't pronounce, getting caught in the rain, and deciding not to rush home. This might sound simple, but it's not. Play requires safety. It requires the belief that you can let your guard down, that you can be foolish or clumsy or ridiculous without it being used against you later. And that kind of safety is the quiet luxury you've been building all along. But thriving doesn't mean the absence of hard days. They still come. There are still moments when an old wound aches, when a sharp word slips out, when life itself throws something heavy between you. The difference now is in how you move through them. You no longer see these moments as proof that you're broken. You see them as invitations to come closer. You've learned to talk sooner, to listen longer, to apologize without making the apology about defending yourself. You don't treat every disagreement like a crack in the glass. You trust the gold you've laid into your foundation. And here's something else that happens when love starts to grow again. You begin to share yourselves more fully than you ever did before. Not just the good, easy parts, but the parts you used to keep hidden. The fears, the insecurities, the private dreams you were afraid might sound too fragile. Because you've both been to the bottom and chosen to climb back together. You know that your connection can hold weight, and that makes you braver. There's also a tenderness that comes from knowing how easily things can break, and how precious it is that they haven't this time. You touch differently now, not out of routine, but with awareness. A hand on the shoulder lingers a little longer. A goodnight kiss feels less like a habit and more like a choice. Even the way you say each other's names carries more care. One of the quiet gifts of thriving is that you stop needing constant reassurance, not because you no longer care, but because you've built a foundation you can trust. You don't wake up every day wondering if today will be the day it all unravels. You wake up curious about what you can create together next. And when you look back now, the break doesn't just feel like the worst thing that ever happened to you. It feels like the moment you learned the truth about love. That it isn't made of unbroken perfection, but of choosing each other again and again. Even after you've seen the cracks, it's made of the gold you pour into the spaces that once felt like ending. The growth you're in now doesn't erase the past, but it transforms it. It turns pain into wisdom. It turns fear into gentleness. It turns two people who were once afraid to touch the broken edges into two people who hold them without flinch. And maybe in the quiet moments, you even feel a strange kind of gratitude for the breaking. Not because it was good, not because it was easy, but because it stripped everything down to the truth. It forced you to see what mattered, to fight for it, and to build something real in its place. Thriving after breaking isn't just about the relationship you have now, it's about the people you've both become. More patient, more open, more willing to see the beauty in imperfection. And that perhaps is the greatest gift of all. To know that love can fall apart and still come back stronger. And so in this new chapter, you live not in fear of the cracks, but in awe of the gold. Because you know now that the breaking wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the love you were always meant to build. If you hold the cup in your hands now, you will see it's not what it once was. The shape is different. The lines are no longer smooth. Fine seams of gold run through it, branching and curving like rivers on a map. If you trace them with your fingertip, you can feel where the pieces once broke apart, the edges that were sharp enough to cut, and yet they no longer hurt you. They have been not with glue, not with force, but with something precious, something that says, this was broken, and we loved it enough to make it whole again. This is what your love looks like now. It is not the untouched kind, the kind that has never been tested. It is the kind that has seen the worst and refused to disappear. It has walked through nights when no words could make it better, through days when the future felt too heavy to imagine, and it has stayed. You may still remember the moment it broke. That sound will never leave you entirely. The silence after the confession, the weight of the truth that landed like a stone in your chest, the way the air felt thinner in the room where you both stood. And yet you also remember something else now. The choice to sit with the pieces. The choice to look at them instead of sweeping them away. The choice to believe that what was once whole could be whole again, even if it would never look exactly the same. And here's the quiet miracle. The love you have now carries more than the love you had before. It carries the memory of survival, the proof that you can both be fragile and strong, wounded and worthy, broken and still beautiful. It carries the tenderness that comes from knowing the cost of losing each other, and the courage it took to return. Sometimes you will catch yourself wondering if you could have reached this place without the breaking. Maybe you could, but maybe the cracks were the only way to let the gold in. When you walk forward from here, you do not walk pretending that nothing ever happened. You walk with the knowledge that something did, and that you faced it together. You walk with the lines of gold between you, not hidden, but shining in the light, telling your story without you having to speak a word. This is what love after breaking teaches you, that it is not the absence of pain that makes something worth keeping, but the presence of a bond strong enough to carry that pain without letting it define you. That forgiveness is not a single moment, but a way of living. That safety is not built by avoiding fear, but by holding each other through it. And maybe the most important thing, that beauty is not in being untouched, but in being touched deeply and still choosing to stay. So tonight, as you sit together, maybe in silence, maybe in conversation, let your eyes rest on the person beside you. Remember the days when you weren't sure you would ever see them like this again. Remember the moments when you almost let go. And then, without needing to say it aloud, let your heart whisper what it now knows. We made it here, and here is worth everything it took to arrive. If the days ahead bring challenges, and they will, remember the way you've learned to hold the goal. Remember that you've walked through worse and returned stronger. And remember that love, once it has been remade in this way, is not easily undone. Because now it doesn't rely on the illusion that you'll never hurt each other. It relies on the truth that you can, and still you choose not to walk away. And in that choice, over and over again, is the real treasure. Not the untouched porcelain, but the gold-filled cracks. Not the perfection, but the proof of endurance. If these words have found you at a time when your love feels fragile, let them stay with you. Let them guide your next conversation, your next gentle touch, your next choice to stay. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them, because we are all, in our own ways, learning how to hold the pieces. And if this message has touched your heart tonight, I invite you to keep walking this journey with us by liking this video, subscribing to Heartnest, and allowing these words to be a reminder, again and again, that love can survive the breaking and still shine with gold.